By critics and fans, I will be torn limb from limb, my blood's still warm, but I've wanted to die since the day I was born. So my final review is Hazbin Hotel.
Fooled ya, and that's what you get for clicking on negative horseshit. Oh man, a creation this ambitious does not come around often, so you know I gotta throw in my 2 cents on this one. Unless you have the misfortune of being an adult who likes cartoons, you might not have heard about Hazbin Hotel. It's a pilot episode of sorts created by a team of independent artists and animators all working together to give life to an idea by cartoonist Vivian Madrano, aka Vivzy Pop. Most folks know her as the animation whiz kid who waved her magic wand and somehow managed to make a Kesha song bearable.
Let's make the most of the night like we're gonna die.
Vivs and her team have spent years putting this together, and now the fruits of their labor have finally been harvested. Was it all worth the effort? Well, that's what I'm here to discuss, so let's get started. Hello?
Hey, you can't review this. Dizzy Pop likes to have sex with children and animals, and she's a transphobe and a racist asshole.
First off, everyone's an asshole, especially yours truly. And second, what proof do you have about the other things?
I got this small handful of really old artwork from DeviantArt and Tumblr.
And?
What do you mean, and? I just proved everything.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Don't people know it's rude to make phone calls in a movie theater? I think it's important to acknowledge that pilot episodes of cartoons are always kinda rough. They're essentially a test run to see if a concept for a cartoon is both functional and fashionable enough to be made into a full series. So animation nuts like myself tend to judge them way less harshly than full-fledged shows. However, there is a tremendous irony to this kind of behavior since criticism is highly important at this stage in a show's production. If a pilot succeeds and the show is greenlit by a network, then every creative decision made from this point onward will have a huge effect on how the series turns out. Therefore, I am taking the gloves off on this one to give Hazbin a thorough critique, cause even a great concept can be made even greater with just a little bit of outside perspective. A key part of making a pilot is laying down the foundation for audience expectations, especially when it comes to storytelling. People need to know what kind of story you're trying to tell and how you intend to tell it. At first glance, Hazbin Hotel's story is simple. Hell is becoming overpopulated, and genocide is being used to keep the population down. As a result, demons are fighting over turf and hunting for ways to get their rocks off in the meantime. Charlie, the princess of hell, wants to give these sinners a better option. A hotel where they can be rehabilitated and sent to heaven instead. It seems simple enough, but there's one huge problem with this premise. What are the stakes? You see, normally violence and death are a big deal in plot-driven shows since their effects are permanent. But since all these characters are already dead and in hell, death doesn't really function as a plot device here. Violence doesn't even seem to have a lasting impact in this world either, since none of the fights we're shown even leave a scratch on the characters involved. So if death isn't a problem here, then why are we supposed to care about the Purge?
Wait, would that make me double dead? Where exactly do I go? To double hell?
If violence has no impact, then what purpose do turf wars serve? If neither of these things matter to the plot or to the characters, then why are we supposed to care about Charlie's path to salvation? Especially since the show itself devalues the concept.
What in the 9 circles makes you think a single denizen of hell would give 2 shits about becoming a better person? You have no proof that this little experiment even works. You want people to be good just because?
The Purge and the Hotel are clearly the main dichotomy we're supposed to value here. But since the laws of this universe are not adequately explained, we don't know what their value really is. We need to know that these characters have something to lose, something to gain, and a set of personal values regarding each. Otherwise, this story just kind of falls flat. And trust me, you do not want that to happen because then you have to rely on... when a series is trying to tell a story or push a narrative, it's hard to balance that out with comedy. On one hand, you want your viewers to be thoroughly invested in what your characters are doing, thinking, and feeling. But on the other hand, you kinda wanna make sure the audience is laughing and enjoying themselves along the way. It's a tough tightrope to walk, and that's why so many showrunners play it safe by focusing on one more so than the other. Shows with an ongoing plot tend to put the story in the front seat and then punctuate it with humor along the way just to provide some relief now and then when things get tense. Shows that focus on comedy tend to be more episodic in nature, since that allows the audience to drop in on any self-contained episode when they're craving some laughs. In that respect, Hazbin is sending some very mixed signals because the quiet moments devoted to music and artistry make it very clear that a story wants to be told. But then those same moments are drowned out by a constant barrage of loud, lewd, and crude quote-unquote adult humor. Look, I feel hypocritical for complaining about this because all 10 of my fans can tell you my channel is littered with such vulgarity and perversion. But there's a time and a place for cramming in non-stop jokes, and I don't think now is the time, and I'm not convinced that your story is the place.
Hey guys, I have this super serious thing I want you all to pay attention to, and it's the structure from which this entire series shall spring forth, therefore...
Oh yeah? Penis.
Yeah, that's, I gotta bring this up. What is up with Angel Dust, man? I loved him when the show was first announced and he was introduced as a vulgar douchebag, but I had no idea he was gonna be so incredibly one note.
Oh, harder, Daddy. Would that make your hat the top and you the bottom? This body is flawless. I can suck your dick.
Seems like any time the show starts to get some traction, this dude shows up just to derail it with a slew of dick jokes. Like, come on, dude, how would you like it if I stopped this review right now just to shoehorn in some sex jokes, huh? Not to mention how some of the visual effects around this guy were left unfinished and his sound effects were really out of place. I mean, how did these creators miss such glaring issues when they all rented out a movie theater together to watch the finished product on a big screen before any of us got to see it? I have a hard time believing that all those talented people were in the same room and still somehow managed to overlook... Wait a second. I did not notice that before. Magnify. Enhance image. Oh my Dow. Hello? Otacon. I'm trying to review Hazbin Hotel, but I just noticed that Fizzy Pop is dummy thick. Now I'm too thirsty to continue the review. How did a monkey get this number? Oh, Snake. He must have written it on a bathroom stall again. Shit, I've still gotta quench this thirst somehow.
Hello?
What were those things you said about Vivzy Pop?
That she's a racist asshole?
No, the other two things.
That she likes to have sex with children and animals because she's a pedophile?
Yeah, that gives me an idea.
Please, madam, I'm so hungry. Can you perhaps spare just a crumb of booty?
God damn it, she's not a pedo or a zoophile at all. Ugh, who would have guessed that you can't trust a stranger on the internet? Now, what was I talking about before all that? I don't remember. Oh yeah, that's because I just stopped all my progress to make one big sex joke. You see the problem here? Yeah, I hope you do. To put it simply, the story is really interesting, the comedy is well-timed and pretty funny in a lowbrow way. But right now, it feels like the two are working against each other, and I think that Hazbin Hotel would be a better show if those scales were tilted more so towards one than the other. Vivzy Pop's art style has always intrigued me because I firmly believe that if you stuck Dr. Seuss and Hot Topic into a blender, these characters would be the result. It's different, I can dig it, but I've seen a lot of people complain about it, and as usual, their complaints are stupid.
All these characters have the same body type.
Oh yeah, we've never seen that before.
The animation is bad, too much is happening.
No, the animation is great, it moves just fine, although I do think a little more subtlety would go a long way. I believe there are only two significant issues with the visuals: color schemes and compositions. Most of the characters and backgrounds share this monochromatic aesthetic, and it makes it very hard to focus on what's moving and what's stationary. In fact, trying to watch these scenes the first time around gave me a huge headache. I know that Vivs is a tremendous Invader Zim fan, and I can tell these harsh red and purple and green colors were probably inspired by that. So I'm gonna use Zim to illustrate what the issue is here. See, look at this. Bright poppy red and purple background, relatively monochrome aside from this little bit over here, pretty interesting on its own. But as soon as Zim is in the picture, bam! This image goes from being monochrome to split complementary, because he's on the opposite end of the color spectrum. That same split complementary scheme also works in green settings because Zim's body and eyes are red. So now when he's moving around, we can focus on him without even trying. However, if I make him that same color scheme, suddenly watching him becomes a pain in the ass. The difference between these two color schemes can be seen side by side in Hazbin during the scene where Charlie is on the news. When all these red characters are moving over a green screen, it's really easy to focus on their movement. But once they're in front of a background that shares their reds and whites and yellows though, things get kinda messy. And look, I get it. Hell being made of all these reds and yellows makes total sense. You don't gotta make everything green and go all Danny Phantom on our asses. You can have that background share the same color scheme as the characters, but you have to adjust the hue or the value. By changing either one, the characters pop forward and become much easier to focus on. As for the composition, Hazbin Hotel has an issue with clarity and perspective. In other words, the placement of characters in some shots makes it hard to distinguish where things are. For example, during that same news scene, it's clear who we're supposed to be focusing on in this shot because Charlie is the most active and perspective is used to maintain that focus since she appears to grow larger as she moves closer to us. Compare that to this scene where it's clear that we're supposed to be focusing on this guy here who's talking. However, not only are a lot of these characters sharing way too many colors with the background, but they all move at the same time on the same plane in the same direction, all while breaking our line of sight with who we're trying to pay attention to. It's hard enough for my puny monkey brain to process all this, so it's easy for me to see why even punier human brains would say, "Too much is happening." Additionally, I'm sure that everyone has noticed some jarring differences in the frame rates and anatomy between some shots. But since this was made by a team of animators who all worked remotely and composited their own frames in their own style, that's not really worth mentioning, since a more thorough production pipeline will iron out those problems if this turns into a series. And I do hope that this turns into a series, by the way, as all of my complaints and nitpicks could easily be remedied if this cartoon is given more time and resources to meet its potential. The sharp style that cuts against the grain of all this curvy, soft stuff that's overtaken mainstream media, as well as the unapologetic vulgarity that our protagonists spit from their forked tongues, all coalesce into this strange concept that feels a lot like a revival of cartoons from the early 2000s, and for better or worse, I want to see some of that. Come to think of it, there are all sorts of cartoons I want to see that just haven't been made yet. And since major networks are making so few of them these days, I think it's up to us to take a stab at creating what we want to see. So I'm gonna take a step back from talking about what everybody else is making and start making some things of my own for a while. And if you're the kind of person who somehow managed to enjoy watching this video all the way up until this point, then I bet there's something you want to make too. So stop listening to me and go do it already. This has been Brad Boucher, your monkey host with the most, signing off to go make some magic. I'll see y'all again real soon though, and I'm taking the spider bitch with me. Oh yeah, we're gonna be like Thelma and Louise, Bonnie and Clyde, bacon and eggs, you and me against the world. We can stay up late and eat ice cream for dinner and play Yakuza 0 until 3 a.m. because that's how we roll, man. That is how we roll.